You know, I hope you don't mind me saying this, everyone, but that's my trick I use in my lectures. I find if I just go, shh, it always works. And I think it's because there's this subliminal thing. A baby must be in the room. Be quiet.
That's funny because it doesn't work when there is a baby in the room, but that's another story. Hang on, you keep it down in the cheap seats. Look, kia ora, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed dinner. We are stopping questions now, but you can continue to vote on them. So if there's a question on the list there that you really like and you want it to get asked, this is order of popularity as the questions go. So let's get into it. And remember, keep voting. So the first question is, how can we teach religious values to a secular world without the bonding narrative of a particular theology? How can we teach character to people who don't believe in a good creator? Just to get you started, Nick.
Ultimately, the answer to the question really is we can't. We can't. I think that's why I framed it the way I did. You probably noticed that while I spoke of religion in the abstract, what I filled it with was actually quite particular. It seems to me that ultimately we need to reflect on these truths. If there was anything true in what I said about human nature, about what our deepest problems are, then it's an implication of those where the truth lies about who we are. I think it's also true that the talk focused on us and not on God or the divine. I think we live in a time, as many have observed, that, I don't know if any of you have heard this expressed, but a lot of people are saying now that we live in the age when anthropology is probably the critical question, not theology. Now, what I mean by that is this. We're living in a time where what it means to be human is the key question. Because we're really wondering who and what we are. And I do think that ultimately we can only answer who and what we are by understanding where we came from and who we came from. And so I do think that there's actually no answer to that question, that you can't avoid a specific theology, you can't avoid a specific religion, you can't avoid the specificity of it. Even though I presented my talk today in a way that didn't say that expressly, but I hope that it did so implicitly. And I hope clearly, actually, if you follow it through to its conclusions. I don't know if that's a fully adequate answer to the question. It's basically saying, actually, if there's a premise behind the question, that questioning whether it's possible to have some generic religion that can solve all the world's problems. My answer is no, I don't think there is a generic religion that can solve the world's problems. It's rather dealing with our fundamental problem within and finding out and working out what it means for that problem to be solved.
So it's, in a sense, it's a personal diagnostic as rather than a prescription. So here, take this, you'll feel better. Well, no, actually, you need to be aware of the problems that your vices, your issues, and how do you do that? It's through this relationship with an ideal.
Yeah, in a sense, I suppose I was encouraging myself and us to undertake that personal diagnostic. But once you undertake that diagnostic, it's going to lead in certain directions, because it's going to force you to face up to truths about yourself, and those truths will in turn force you to face up to truths about reality and the God who's behind that reality. So I'm not sort of pretending that this is not something that's coming from my own religious perspective about things.
Thank you. The next question, he puts his glasses on. Can you read that? We did rehearse this as a joke. Hang on. Oh, got it. Here we go. Some prominent people, Jordan Peterson, Tom Holland, even Richard Dawkins, acknowledge that religion has benefits without necessarily believing it's true. Can we get the character-forming benefits you describe without actual living faith? Can religion be a mere social technology?
I mean, I think that's a very similar question at its base. And so again, my answer is no, in the sense that I think that a true assessment of ourselves will, if it was only true, as it were, if we really were honest with ourselves, we would recognise what is deeply in our hearts, and we would recognise, as I put it, our need for forgiveness and our need to forgive. And if you think through that, it means that it's a recognition that we are accountable to the person who made us, and that accountability means that we need that person's forgiveness, and that as a consequence we also need to forgive one another. Yeah.
Is there, when I think about, when I reflect on the virtues that you're describing, forgiveness, humility, is there some way that they can be enshrined in our public relations, our public square? Because again, that's an external, like, oh, we must be humble, we must be forgiving. You get back to the issue of prescribing.
Yeah, I don't actually think so. I mean, one of the things that I remember studying a few years ago was, you might remember that I referred to the primary agencies that regulate, and then the secondary agencies that regulate the primary agencies, and then the secondary agencies are found to themselves be corrupt, and then you have an infinite regress of agencies checking up on each other, and you're not getting to the root of the problem. And that really came out of a report that I had to do with another person on the Crime and Corruption Commission in Queensland, which is designed to try an agency, a secondary agency that is meant to be checking that the primary agencies are doing what is right. But unfortunately, from time to time, it's discovered that the secondary agency has its problems as well. And what comes to mind...
So you were the tertiary agency?
In a sense, we were. We were the tertiary agency. One of the things that we looked at in the course of that study was the legislation that was trying to enact goodness. And it was trying to express a whole lot of what they called values that they expected of the public service, almost like if we've enacted it, somehow magically it will happen. And there's something false about that. There's something just posturing about it. There's something profoundly ineffective about it, short of the sort of deep work in each individual's heart about whether I'm going to face up to the fact that I'm envious of people, or that I'm greedy, or that I have malice, or that I have an ambition that's willing to run over the top of others, or a willingness to break the rules to get my own ends. Unless we face up to those realities about ourselves, you're never going to produce a good society or an incorruptible or incorrupted Crime and Corruption Commission.
How did it go with the Crime Corruption Commission? Did they take your advice?
Certainly, the one thing that I felt did succeed was, one of the recommendations was to reduce the threshold for making complaints, and they reduced the threshold, and that was my big win. But in a sort of way, that was reducing the ambition of the law. It was saying, let's not try to aim for this sort of moral perfection out of the law and set such a high standard that public servants are dobbing on each other for the lightest and smallest possible sort of misdemeanours, or even just bare suspicion that it's possible that they might have. Because the thought was that that can just be used to generate what we called grudge informers, the sort of person that uses the capacity to complain about somebody to actually achieve some other end. And so it's an example of where the law had been enacted in a way thinking, let's lift a very, strong threshold, or even, what am I saying, high or low, a threshold where, more complaints will be made so that we'll root out everything that's wrong in the public service without stopping to think about human nature and what humans will do if given the opportunity to dob on each other at a very easy level. And not realising that what really is going to help the public service to be less corrupt is less corrupt character and not the ability to dob on each other. But not ignoring the need for what law can do in a very basic sense of, penalties for corruption and standards of integrity that are expected to which people are accountable. The law can do those very fundamental things. It's just expecting it to produce good character is where it miscues. And I think an example would be the example Tim was saying of sort of blazoning across your corporation, these are our values, or something like that. You really do wonder how much that just tends to generate more cynicism in your employees than real genuine change within.
I do find when I read the word values, or I hear about values in an organisational context, something in me curdles. Because, you can imagine the values committee sitting around with a whiteboard and organising. It seems inorganic, let's put it that way. That's the best way I can evoke it. But.
I think another thing that underscores is that I suppose I made the illustration of the difficult task that teachers have and schools have in caring for their children. And there's almost a sense in which we place so much weight on the schools to form good people. And, many teachers I talk to are saying, but, they're not hearing the same thing in their family life, and we're making up for what's going wrong there. And I think we could also say that culturally, we just don't have the formative institutions of family and church and other things like that conform us. And so much pressure gets placed on just a few institutions to try and make up for so much.
Actually, Maxim has done research on curriculum, and one of our conclusions was that the curriculum is overburdened. And I guess I've had a reflection too about the things that we expect police to take care of, and as well as teachers to take care of. They are increasingly under pressure because it's like, well, these other institutions aren't doing what they might have done typically, so we just have to move them along. I think I prefer, and to go back to that values thing, I prefer the word virtues, and I hope that no one who's in an organisation will go back to their website now and take out the word value and put in virtues and think, okay, we're okay now.
Well, that's the point of a virtue. It's not something in writing. A virtue is a character quality. We use words to describe them, but their substance is in you and me, or their contrary is in you and me, the vice. And just writing them down doesn't make them so.
Let's move on to the next question. Given the decline of involvement in all forms of local community, not just churches, but Rotary clubs, local politics, our local body politics, there's low engagement in our country, sports leagues, etc. Can organised religion still offer the, quote, conversion of the soul it did in previous generations?
I think that's just the deep issue that we face. I suspect there's probably a number of pastors here and people who work in church contexts, but also people who run community organisations or clubs and so on. And I think our countries have enjoyed very high levels of volunteering and participation, but we're very conscious of a decline in participation across the board. And it's not like I think there's a simple answer, right? But I think that it begins with me and you and our character and our willingness to face up to our own flaws and our own character issues and grow in that. I'm not a pessimist ultimately, actually, because I think history demonstrates that there are times of renewal in societies and communities that actually do happen in the past. And I think it's hard for us in Western countries to see that because we feel in some ways a sense of decline, despite the fact that we have so much prosperity, really, even though we do suffer from some sense of downturn sometimes, and we do at the moment here in this country. But times of renewal really do come, and they come in a surprising way. And somebody talked about Jordan Peterson and all of those people. I do think there's a shift in the way public discourse is working at the moment. I think it is true that the very public and aggressive atheists of the world, of the Western world, are no longer as aggressive and as public. And so it might be...
Why do you think they are less aggressive and less public?
Probably because atheism has just run out of puff. Really? I mean, it's atheism, so it really doesn't actually stand for anything. So it lacks anything to really inspire you. It's by definition negative, a bit like the way I said law is by definition negative. And so it performs a certain negative function of attacking and bringing down stuff. But once you've torn it all down, what then? How will you live? So I think that might be one factor. I think maybe another one is that a lot of those people are looking around the world and asking, well, religion, Christianity has declined in the West, but look at what's happening in the West. It's not actually looking good in these long-term trends. I think we better tone down our rhetoric a little bit, and you're seeing them doing it.
To your point about the decline of atheism, Pew Research does surveys of religious belief, and recently there was some surprise that the numbers of nuns, i.e. no religious belief, had actually declined by a small amount in the most recent survey. So typically it's just tracked upwards, and in the latest survey it had declined. What I was also interested, a local organisation, Wilberforce, does a faith survey, and there was I think for those doing the survey, they were quite surprised by amongst Gen Z, if I'm recalling it correctly, a higher rate of people who were spiritual, quote unquote. So I wonder if what we're seeing is sort of the end of, say in the configuration of the Enlightenment, it's like it's either faith versus reason, whereas now it seems to be that spirituality, and whatever that may be, is also taking the place of what used to be the reason argument against faith. I don't know if you have a view on that, but...
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why I use the word religion. And I know that in some circles the word religion is seen as not the right word to use, but it is what Augustine used, and if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Because he pointed out that the word religion comes from a Latin root, religio, from which we also get the word ligament in English. And on Augustine's account of the etymology, it means what you are bound to, and so forth. And I think that the thing about spirituality is it often doesn't mean anything you're bound to. And so it fits very nicely within the idea that you just choose your beliefs, you choose your values, and you get fuzzy feelings about it. Whereas religion as a word can be understood in the sense of something that's cutting deeper into your soul and actually exposing yourself to actually what might be wrong about you internally, and not just a sort of self-justificationary, pleasant feeling sort
vibe
of spirituality.
Yeah. And that sense of self-curation is a very, it seems, there's a great book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman, which talks about the self-curated individual. And that also, I think, taps into the decline of the communitarian definition of who we are. Who am I? Well, I'm part of this club. I support that team. I go to Rotary on a Wednesday, etc., etc. As people self-curate, it's more a reflection of internal predilections and preferences rather than receiving information from the outside. I have to say that our oldest boy plays soccer, and when I see the parents and kids of Central United gathered together on the side of a football field, I feel very hopeful about our communities because they are united, they are involved, and they're cheerful. And that's that sense of hope that is so important. And I think what we're talking about in some way is a decline in the absence of hope. Okay, next question. If religion is the solution to a societal crisis of character, where do we begin with making that a reality when the social imaginary of our society treats religion as a moral evil?
Immediately to my mind comes a passage from the book of James that says, true religion, can someone remind me of exactly how it words, is to visit, come on, to visit widows, isn't it? To visit widows and orphans in their distress. That's the answer. In other words, I think that, I suppose that's why I was keen to say that character is not just about, and these virtues are not just internal, they're not. They actually are expressed in what you do and expressed in how you relate to people. And so it seems to me that the key is just relating well to people. I mean, what was the name of the lady, what was her name again, who was an English professor at Syracuse University, and she was in a same-sex relationship and she became converted. Yes, Rosaria Butterfield, isn't it? And she said that what converted her soul was a loving, kindly, I think in this instance, Presbyterian pastor and his wife who just showed her love and hospitality. And that's what won her over. So I think it's really quite simple, actually. I actually think that there's nothing more needed if you are a Christian than love.
Is there anything else?
Faith and hope.
I was just asking for my bad days.
But I mean that because I think for all of us, it's very easy to substitute the fundamentals for a whole lot of other stuff. And I do think that that's probably part of the reason why many of us institutionally have lost our way, is what is really the main game? What is the main thing? And I've always thought, but not very well lived out myself, that the essential is love. And you don't need anything more than love. I've not really seen too many people react badly to love. And you don't have to be clever, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be musical, you don't have to be beautiful, in the sense well presented. Genuine love is genuine love, and it cuts through everything. To me, that's the fundamental.
I just want to let that rest. I was thinking, will we wrap it up there? We've got a little bit more time. We'll do a couple more, but thank you for that. Next question. You mentioned that law, education and markets are not the answer, but what is the role of the institution of whānau, family, community?
What was the first institution?
Oh, whānau, which it's te reo Māori for family.
Oh, thanks. Sorry. Oh, well, I mean, I do think that given the importance of the centrality of faith, hope and love at the heart of things and all of the virtues, they are all expressed not individualistically, but in community with others. And the communities in which we express them are firstly the ones we are born into. Because the fundamental reality of every human being is a mother and a father. And that's why it's such a tragedy if a little baby is bereft of their parents. And that's why pure and true religion is concerned about orphans. But it underscores just how central that family is, every family, and how central then in an ever-widening arc of relations are your cousins and your uncles and your aunts and your neighbours and the community you live with. It seems to me that I suppose a second lecture would possibly develop how it arcs out to the communities, and I suppose I would say that to my mind, it does arc out from the fundamental close small communities in which we all find ourselves, and only eventually gets to those those wider and more remote relationships that we have, entire cities, entire nations, and internationally as human beings on this planet. So I think that those institutions are central.
Yeah. And I would say too, generationally there's a huge, the succession of generations is a huge part of that, as certainly when I consider the people who've helped me to do what I never expected to do, or just the effect that others often very generously and without any thought for themselves assist you because they want to see you flourish, or they're actually generous people. They have that quality. Then that too gives you a sense, again, just recoiling from that sense of being self-made. The notion of the self-made person is, on examination, it's very difficult to sustain. Oh, good. Yes, thanks. Increase the point size. Okay. Oh. Okay.
If you only saw what we can see.
Yeah. We just saw a whole lot of questions go through, and well, actually, you know what it is? We have been talking for about 30 minutes, which is what we had down as the question time. I wish I could have ended it more elegantly. But such is life. Look, why don't I just...
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
My one thing would be that if there's anything in what I said, and if there are gaps or things that need to be developed from what I said, please do it. Work out those gaps. Put it into practice. I just hope that I've triggered some thoughts for you, because, the task lies in each one of your lives with what you now do with this and what you do in your families, your workplaces, your communities. And I just encourage you to work through the implications with the wisdom and knowledge and understanding that you each have to contribute to the good. That'd be my hope.
Thank you, Nick. Well, this concludes the more formal part of our evening, but I know you can get back to talking, debating, discussing, catching up. Thank you again, Professor Nick Aroney, for provoking discussion and thought. And particularly, as I've observed you over the last 3 days, I've really enjoyed how you often ask yourself questions. One of your favourite phrases is, how do I put this? How do I put it? And often we get a useful answer when we're asking ourselves the right question. So that search for the right question is crucial. Now, I did mention people taking notes. We do have copies of Nick's speech that you will be given as you leave. There on the publications table, but there's also going to be a table outside, so please take a copy with you when you go. I want to say again a big thank you to our sponsors, Keith A. Holmes and Foley Wines, who helped make tonight possible. Thank you very much. And thank you too to those donors who have supported this event. They are generous and humble, so they would be blushing at the gills if we identified them. But we appreciate you hugely and are grateful for your concern for the intellectual nourishment of our nation. We took Nick down to Wellington yesterday, and we had a session with an ex-PM, ex-Treasury head, people who are currently in the policy and academic nexus. And one of the comments, it was actually a really good session in the sense that people didn't actually want to win an argument. They just wanted to get to the truth. Yeah, I know, controversial, right? But one of the comments that was made was, this doesn't happen often enough. We don't get these kinds of discussions. And it was Chatham House rules, but that happened yesterday because of the support of people. And I believe it's happened tonight too. So thank you. And thank you to all of you who support Maxim to do better. Last year we produced more research than we ever have. We had more media engagement, a record level, and our internship continues to flourish. Our interns are working in the offices of cabinet ministers, advocacy organisations like Ethos Alliance and the Free Speech Union, and in government departments as well. And so we are very excited by that. I will note that we're a charity, and so because of that, we're grateful for the donations that you give us. Now, I had threatened the staff that I'd wander around with an FPOS machine, hitting people up, and they said, no, don't say that, don't do that, you'll ruin the whole vibe of the evening. I apologise if I've done that. But look, I'm just so grateful for this event and for this evening, and for all of you in this room, and what we've shared. So I want to pick up on something Nick raised about how we take what we've done, what we've been through here tonight and learned outside of the doors of this room, outside into where we live and where we work in our families. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the change in me that I have to affect? How can I provide better character in myself? And of course, if I don't change, nothing will. So I encourage you to scrutinise yourselves. I encourage you to be merciful to others. And I thank you, and may God bless you. Good night.